along and enjoy the rest of the day and do your organization operating here in the UK. And the whole focus of today's discussion is around the rights of workers in Bangladesh, in India, in Pakistan, who are working for these multinational companies and corporations churning out millions of pounds worth of garments for us to enjoy here in the UK and in Europe and in the US. Why is that a problem? Sounds like a good thing. The problem is that those workers that are working in those factories, they don't have the same rights or privileges as people enjoy in the UK and in Europe and in the US. They don't have basic rights in terms of having sort of sanitary facilities in those factories. They don't have basic rights in terms of, I mean, today we feel hot here in the UK. This is a cold day in Bangladesh, in India or Pakistan compared to what they usually have to work in. The temperatures around 40, 45 degrees are the usual norm, and there's no air conditioning or adequate ventilation in those properties in which they are working, those factories. Those would be a privilege if they had adequate ventilation and air conditioning. But even that we're not talking about here today. That's not really our worry. Our worry is even more greater than that. It's the loss of lives that we've seen, and you get that in those countries as well. Power cuts. It's the loss of lives that we're really concerned about. And we've seen in the news in recent months, it's been in the national news, on CNN, on Sky, on BBC and others, about the disaster that took place in Bangladesh on the 24th of April this year. Over 1,000 people died needlessly. They didn't need to die. They could have continued working those factories if those factories were safe for them to work in, but they clearly weren't. A whole building, 8-story building, collapsed, and with them burying everybody that was inside those buildings. And this is not the first. In Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in India, there have been numerous issues with buildings which house these factories. I mean, I was shocked to hear that in Rana Plaza there are about 5,000 workers working at any moment in those buildings. That's shocking, because that building isn't a huge building. You'd think it was a huge complex, an industrial estate that would have so many workers working, but it wasn't. It was a small 8-story factory that squashed people like sardines to work in those factories with heavy machinery, and those buildings that weren't built to house those equipments. And unfortunately, we saw the consequences. And even then, when there were indications that the building was collapsing or cracking under pressure, vibration and so forth, the owners did very little to safeguard the workers that were working. In fact, they forced them to work in those conditions. So we have concerns over the working conditions in these factories. We have concerns about the way these factory owners are treating and dealing with people that are working in these factories. We're concerned about the government of these countries that are allowing those factories to run without adequate public safety, without any liability or accountability of those factory workers. We're also here today to talk about the role that you and I, as people who buy clothes from various outlets, what we could do to change the way that those multi-corporation go and contract with those countries. We can change their attitude. We did a campaign which is called Made in Bangladesh campaign a couple of months ago in Birmingham City Centre. And one of the ideas behind that campaign was to raise awareness among shoppers to say, do you know where your clothes are produced from? You take great pride in the label that you wear, you take great pride in the value of the clothes that you wear, but do you know how they're produced and where they're produced from? And it's starting that majority of the people don't actually know that. And we need to raise awareness of people so that they know where their clothes are produced from, and they can question those manufacturers to say, are my clothes that I'm wearing, my jacket, my shirt, my blouse, my trousers, my skirt, are they ethically produced? That's step number one. The second one is those corporations. We need to pressurize them to say it is a duty upon you to ensure that the factories that you contract with, that they are providing facilities for those workers which meet basic standards for those people to work in. And that's what we're pushing them. And they can do that. Now you may ask, why are we pushing the corporations to introduce guidelines in factories? If you know anything much about Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, you know that corruption is quite rife in those countries. Government and factory owners are colluding. Quite often those factory owners are associates of those governments or government departments or government institutions or ministers. So there's very little that can happen with regards to the government enforcing a change or vice versa. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place in a way. Change can happen from here. Within UK, within Europe, within US, we can influence some change. And we're working with our politicians, and there will be a number of politicians that will be coming here later today. They've actually got surgery today up until 12 o'clock. They'll now be closing their surgery and making their way from the various places that they will be coming from. We've got confirmation from Lolibert MP from Solihull. We've got confirmation from Phil Benyon, a member of European Parliament for West Midlands. He'll be coming along. We've got confirmation from John Hemmings, MP from Yardley, and also Khalid Mahmood from Perry Barr. Shabana Mahmood has given her apologies. She's had a prior engagement, so she won't be able to join us today, but she's given me a letter wishing us well and supporting very much our endeavours here of what we're seeking to do today, and wishing us well with regards to us progressing with this. We have a number of speakers for you here today, and if I could quickly ask the speakers to come and join us in the front. Kathy Gaffney and Naim, if you want to come and join us as well. Naim will be introducing the speakers because he knows much more about them than I do, so he'll be introducing them later on. If I could also ask Dr. Kalpana Wilson if you could come and join us as well in the front. I think we've got a few buttons to press, young man. If you move forward a bit more. That's it. If you leave it there, that's great. My fault for not instructing. That's my little son there. So I thought I'll give him something to do rather than play with his mobile. Okay. In terms of running through the program, we also have a video message from the Deputy General Secretary of the National Trade Union Federation Pakistan. We wanted to do a live link up, but unfortunately this building hasn't got the facility to connect Wi-Fi from upstairs to downstairs because there's concrete blocks everywhere which prevents Wi-Fi from getting through. But Naim will tell you more about that in a second. And then we'll hear from Kathy and then Dr. Kalpana. And then after that, we've got a number of councillors and MPs, and then we'll have questions and answers and suggestions from the floor. I'll hand over to Naim to introduce the speakers and also say a few words with regards to why he's here, and also from the Union Unite that he's representing today.
Thanks for everybody to come here today. He's taking time off on a weekend to be here. I think the main reason we are here is because of there have been several incidences in our countries, in Bangladesh, in India and Pakistan, where a large number of workers have died. And I think the principal thing to know about that is those deaths were not necessary, they could have been prevented. And we are particularly, this initiative was taken by the Birmingham Trades Council, Unite in the City, and various other trade union members and individuals, and also community organizations, to bring the unions in this country and the unions in Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, where the exploitation is so rife and so oppressive that so many people die when incidents take place. And I think, so for that purpose, what we are trying to do is to see whether we can connect to trade unions in our countries, with trade unions here and with communities here. We've got two roles. As people living in this country, we actually buy goods that are produced in Bangladesh, Pakistan and India. Also, as trade unionists, we work for companies that actually export goods from those places. So we can put pressure on those companies to make sure that they abide by good health and safety environments in which people work in Bangladesh and Pakistan and India. So first of all, what I've got is a member of the Pakistan Trade Union Movement. He's also the Deputy General Secretary of the National Trade Union Federation in Pakistan. He's been actively involved in what happened in Karachi last year in October when over 300 people died in a fire. And the principal reason why so many people died in that fire because there was no adequate escape routes. The windows were blocked with metal bars because they did not want people to come and rob their clothes or whatever. But the conditions of the workers were given secondary importance. So I think he's going to be talking about what he wants to happen if these incidents don't take place. The situation in Pakistan is very dire. Every day, I mean, you saw a couple of seconds of power cut here. In Pakistan, there's a power cut at 12 hours every day, particularly in Karachi. So I was forced to record this over the mobile. So the voice may not be very clear, but I will make the salient points at the end of his thing, basically what he wants us to do. So I'll introduce, or I'll let Nasir speak first, and then we'll move on.
It's a 9 in Pakistan. So in September 11 there was a big fire in the very center of Pakistan. One of the movies where the root of the Pakistani Karachi industry is located is called South Area, Shisha. The factory is a garment factory, and there was a fire, and for 7 hours there was a series of high brigade was there, and even the water was not there. So when there was a fire, the manager and the owner had forced the guard of the factory to please them turn the gates and ask them to first remove the machinery and the material, and then allow the workers to get out of the factory. But so there was agitation, and it was a attempted murder, and the first workers to be burned alive in the fire. The situation was that the factory was not registered with the under the Factory Act, which is 1937 Factory Act, it was not registered with it. Even the fire, the equipment are not sufficient, and these were not cleared from the company or organization. And another issue was the building, and building was not cleared by and they are approved by the Karachi Building Authority. So number of illegality was involved in it. So we can say that for 11 years that factory was running without legality. It was illegal. Another thing is that not a single worker in that factory has a concentrator. Near 2,000 workers are employed with that factory in different shifts. So we can say that if not a single worker was a permanent worker, and there was a contract system, which is called, another word is a third-party contract system. Not a single worker was registered with the Social Security Institute. Not a single worker was registered with the pension and age benefit. There was a union, and not a single worker has, you can say that any right with the state in the laws. Another thing is that there was only one gate when there was a fire, only outside there was one gate. All the factory on the outside of the building were closed down, was the case, and the village was covered with the iron bars. So the majority of workers died because of them.
I think because the sound is not very clear, I'm going to move it almost to the end, because that will give more
And after this meet, they were dissidents.
And when we go to them and say your factories are, the health and safety is not good in those factories in this country, they say to us that we go and inspect these factories and they are right. We think that they are just telling a story.
Basically, they should not, you see, they are both have the same interest. The retailers, the importers, and the exporters. They are on the other side of the equation. But if you ask involve the trade union, the unions in it, and then we can say that, if the union says that, if the federation of the trade union, they say that, the things are good in the factory, then we can say that it's a union. But if the manufacturers say that, the factory, everything is okay in the factory, somewhere, this is that everything is good in the factory, we can't understand that. How should we say that the way the merchandise where we use them, the things are not good? They can't say that. Otherwise they can't sell their products for the market.
Okay.
So I think that I think that there should be a mechanism about it. Even we say that. They should make a mechanism where the buyer, from the buyer's representative, there's a working club, trade union representative, one from the domicile representative, even one from the manufacturer. They form a committee and that mechanism to check the factory.
Yeah.
We are ready to do it.
I think that's a very good suggestion, and I think we're going to try and raise this within the trade union movement in Europe and Britain. And thanks very much for giving us this talk about what actually happened in Pakistan, in Karachi. And hopefully it will succeed in bringing health and safety to everybody in the world.
Yeah. It's very minor in Pakistan. September 9, there was a big fire in the very center of
I think because the sound wasn't very clear, because I was recording it from his mobile, because his power was down. I'm going to just say the few basic points that he made. First of all, he said that the workers are working without any contract with their employers. So there's no contract with the employers as such. They're working under for very low pay. I think basically what he said was they get about £40 a month. Okay. And also that there is no control over health and security safety. This factory that he's talking about in Pakistan was just a few weeks before it caught fire. It was given a clean certificate from a European company, so the factory is safe for operations. And in fact, if anybody had gone from here, even the person who is not a professional in terms of health and safety would have said that place was not safe, because there were metal bars on the windows and everything, so people just could not escape if there was a fire. Fire brigade did not arrive for several hours because there was no provisions made for fire brigades to be there in the factory very quickly. And in fact, the workers were prevented from escaping, and the first priority was given to get the goods and the machinery out. So I think that's the crux of what the conditions were. What he's also saying is that they do not, as trade unionists, have any confidence in the industrialists in Pakistan or in Bangladesh for that matter. They have no confidence in the government because the certificates are issued for the factories were paid for by the government, right? So if anybody had actually gone and seen those factories, they would have seen how those things don't match up. Because the certificates are given by European companies, they do not actually have confidence in the multinationals who are actually purchasing from those countries either. So what he's saying is that if there is going to be health and safety for the workers in these countries, the involvement of the trade union movement in those countries is paramount. There must be one of the three. So it must be an agreement between the multinationals, between the trade unions, and between the producers or industrialists. So they should all agree that a particular place is safe before it actually gets used. And I think we have a role to play in that. We, as either trade unionists who are working in these companies who import from those countries, or as consumers, that we ensure that people like Primark comply with that requirement that the trade unionists in those countries are asking us to do. So I think that is enough for us to discuss. I mean, one thing I would like to point out is this meeting is actually also being sponsored by the Birmingham Trades Union Congress, which includes a lot of the trade unionists and other trade apart from Unite, and they have members working in Primark and various other retailers, and so I think we would be using that venue as well to put pressure on them. I've got with us today Kathy Gaffney. She is the Secretary of the West Midlands Hazards Trust. The trade unionists in this country have a long period of experience struggling for the health and safety of their members. And I think Kathy heads the West Midlands, she's the Secretary of the West Midlands Hazards Trust, and they are particularly involved with asbestos and with various other things which the workers face on a daily basis. So I'll let her explain what they do and how they work in this country. Kathy?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm Secretary of West Midlands Hazards Trust, and we employ 2 people to run a thing called Asbestos Support West Midlands, and that is an organisation which helps families and people who have asbestos-related diseases. Now, we are part of the National Hazards Campaign, and that is a loose coalition of a number of different organisations and individuals, many of whom are trade union safety representatives. And there is a National Hazards magazine. It's also part of the European Work Hazards Network, so there are similar organisations, not identical, but similar organisations in several European countries, and contacts in various other countries around the world doing a similar job, campaigning around health and safety issues. Now, trade unions is something that we do work very closely with, and we are active trade unionists ourselves. I've always been an active trade unionist in my workplace. I'm a member of Unite and also now of Unison, which is the one in my new workplace. My last job was an organiser for University and College Union, which is the trade union for university lecturers and college tutors. And I have been an active branch activist and workplace rep on a number of different occasions. Now, one of the things that we do say on trade union health and safety is that it's a necessary thing to have a safe workplace is for it to be unionised, and in the UK we have quite a unique situation whereby we have safety representatives, and they have legal rights to be able to do a number of different things. We're still trying to improve the rights, and as we have been for many years, and I've been involved with this National Hazards Campaign and as an active trade unionist certainly since they introduced the rights for safety reps in 1974. So there are a number of different things which I want to talk about just in relation to my own experience about different campaigns that have something to show, which point the way forward, I think. It may not have escaped your notice that it's 25 years since the Piper Alpha disaster. Now, I was working at the West Midlands Health and Safety Advice Centre when that disaster happened, and there were, I think it was 167 people were killed on that occasion, And as in a lot of similar cases, it sparked off a lot of changes, and we hope that the Bangladesh factory collapse will also spark off a number of changes. It's always been the case. I mean, right back at the beginning of trade unionism, it was the dangers in railways and various other industries that actually brought trade unions in the first place. About just over 100 years ago, there was a big fire in a New York garment factory which had collapsed, and that brought on new trade unions, changes in the law and so on. And the same happened with Piper Alpha, which was an oil rig which collapsed in the North Sea. Well, it exploded and went on fire, and a new trade union was formed there and so on. Changes were made in the law. The Health and Safety Executive actually became the enforcing authority instead of the Department of Energy. So there were lots of changes like that which took place out of it, and a lot of campaigns were started which are still going on. There was a Piper Alpha Families organisation which still fights for changes and justice and continues. But in terms of the role of trade unions, I think sometimes when it's international work, although the trade unions are strong in any particular country, I don't think that it's not a traditional thing. It's only in recent years that the links internationally have been made stronger. All the trade unions do have international confederations of similarly grouped organisations, and also they have agreements in place for a number of different industries, of which the textiles will be one, and those kind of links need to be addressed. There are things like the International Labour Organisation, and there are labour organisation related groups such as Labour Start, which will be, I gather that they are collecting a petition about union rights in Bangladesh and so on. So they are quite separate, but they need to be pursued and involved. When the Bhopal disaster happened, quite a long time ago, as well as Piper Alpha was a long time ago, but still the relatives and the families who were involved still haven't had anything like that kind of justice, although international campaigning has taken place, and TV programs have been made about it and so on. But it does become a cause célèbre which needs to be pursued and fought over. In my own case, one thing that I have been involved with was the campaign to bring in corporate manslaughter laws in this country. Now, I think there were important lessons from that. Our particular role when I worked at the Health and Safety Advice Centre in Birmingham was that we commissioned research into deaths at work in the West Midlands, and the conditions, even in this country, can be really bad. I mean, people are shocked when I say how bad they were, certainly at that time, in the black country, in a lot of different places. And again, it's the issue of places that are unionised tend to be much safer. But in those days, there were some very dangerous workplaces where safety was totally disregarded, and I'm sure they still exist today, a lot of them. And we, out of this research that we did, we, at the same time as publishing the results of our research into these deaths, we also commissioned a TV program and set in motion campaigns and issues to raise at exactly the same time through different trade unions mainly. And there were some immediate effects. There was a scene that was very embarrassing for the Environmental Health Organisation, who enforced health and safety in non-industrial type workplaces such as markets and so on. But they were shown in our programme that we commissioned not to have a clue as to what they would do if they wanted to pursue a manslaughter issue against an employer, and as a direct result of that programme, their conditions, the protocol that they used was tightened up. That was only one small chain in a much longer list of events, which led eventually to corporate manslaughter being brought in as a crime under law in this country. Now, as with a lot of things, it's still not as good as we would have liked it to have been, but it has been brought in. It has brought in some improvements, and I think one of the lessons from that campaign were that you need a broad coalition of like-minded organisations and sympathetic academics and lawyers and so on, and I think this would be something that would be needed in this case. Now, I do know that it's a good thing that on June the 29th there was what's called the National Day of Action, National Day of Action to End Death Traps. Now, I didn't even know about it till it was over, and I'm involved with the Hazards campaign. It hasn't had a lot of publicity in this country, but obviously hopefully that's only a little step in the direction of what to bring in. Now, I looked at the organisations that are involved in that, and there are community organisations such as people for ending sweatshops and so on, and there are some trade unions, mostly American ones, and it wasn't listed a single UK trade union involved as yet, so I'm hoping this is a snowball effect that we will have to generate. And are we going to have a local coalition of interested groups? Are we going to invite trade unions? I will say in particular Unite. I know we've got a few people here from Unite today, including myself, but Unite was one of the organisations that one of the trade unions, one of the principal ones actually, to take up the call of bringing in the corporate manslaughter regulation, which became law, and it made a significant difference to the campaign coming in, and I think that is an important lesson to learn. And using nowadays, using social networking, using things like YouTube and all things that were not available in the days of Piper Alpha. It is so much quicker to actually get the word around, and looking beyond at least some of the health and safety campaigns that are around, that is actually how the word has been getting spread. And another campaign I've been involved in, not as a health and safety campaign as such, but when in my capacity as a UCU organiser for that trade union, I was the West Midlands coordinator for the SAVE ESOL, which is English as a Second Language courses that were being squeezed out by the government at that time, and we got together, certainly locally, and that same thing happened in other parts of the country. We were the different trade unions that were involved with the people who were actually the lecturers and tutors who were taking these courses, but also with a lot of the students, and particularly the students on the ESOL courses, and a number of different organisations, the community groups and Asian and other ethnic community groups locally. Through Birmingham Voluntary Services Council, I had contacted all the different groups in Birmingham, and we came together in a number of different meetings. We got big coach loads of people down to London to lobby their MPs. They spoke to them personally. I spoke to my MP personally, and so did a number of other people, and big petitions and so on the go. And we did actually make some improvements. I mean, again, it wasn't everything we wanted, but the government had wanted to bring in a lot more changes in terms of stopping the ESOL courses, and they weren't able to actually do those changes at that particular time. So the biggest other campaign that I've been involved with on health and safety, which also involves trade unions and other activists, is on the asbestos issue. Now I'm sure just about everybody here will realise that asbestos is a really deadly substance. I mean, not everybody does. I do remember distinctly one of the people that I helped as when I worked at the Health and Safety Advice Centre was an Asian woman who had actually worked with asbestos, and in her workplace, where most of the workers were Asian and very few of them spoke any English, they didn't actually know about asbestos and the dangers that they were facing every day, and we helped them to get organised in the workplace. But I think probably most people now know about it. It was certainly known about even when I first started working at the Health and Safety Advice Centre, which I was at for 20 years. And principally through organisation in the workplace in the 60s and 70s, where there was a number of actions taken against asbestos in workplaces. It got eventually stopped in this country, but it's an ongoing, an accumulating campaign which still goes on, and now the situation that we're organising around in this country is mainly the removal of asbestos in a safe way from things like schools and other buildings. But it still goes on around the world. It's still used. Now we've fought an actual successful campaign in terms of Canada was producing a lot of asbestos and distributing it around the world. That has largely stopped, but it still goes on, and there is an international ban asbestos secretariat which we're involved with, and that is raising the issue and with partial success in more and more different countries. Now I'd hoped Doug Jewell, who was going to be who is our employee at Asbestos Support West Midlands, would be here today. He said he would, and he was going to bring a stall, but he's actually something urgent's come up, and he's actually having to work in the office helping asbestos victims this morning. We do have a Workers' Memorial Day, which happened last year just after the Bangladesh factory collapse, which we brought up there, but hopefully by the time we get the next one, we will be raising a lot more issues and involving a lot more organisations, and I hope that we can build that locally and get people raising that as an issue that builds up onto the annual time when it comes around next April. So I'm not going to say anything very much more now because it's the end of my time, but I'll answer any questions happily at the end.
Thanks very much, Kathy. I think Kathy has raised some very important points. I mean, first of all, what happened in Bhopal happened because the manufacturer, the industrialist, could not operate that factory the way he was operating it in India, in the United States. So he actually moved the production to India, where he can actually exploit the lack of health and safety regulations, and that ended up causing so many thousands of deaths. I think you mentioned asbestos at the end. I think in Pakistan, the ships from this country are now being taken to Karachi to be dismantled because the asbestos regulations here are such that it would be too expensive to dismantle them here. So they are actually killing people in Pakistan or in Karachi because that is cheaper to do. So I think that's something why we need to come together. I think we also, the reason for calling this meeting was so that we can organize a campaign. And I think it will be a local campaign in Birmingham which will probably link up nationally, and hopefully the trade union movement would join it, because Unite is supporting this today, the Birmingham Trades Council is, and we will approach them again. But I think if you want to be part of the campaign, there is Tony here who's from the community branch, and give his name, and then we'll be keeping you in touch with anybody who wants to be part of this campaign, and we'll keep you informed. I think we've got another speaker. She is Kalpana Wilson. She's written on race, racism and development. She's also a member of the South Asia Solidarity Group, which actually includes people from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka and India. They have been operating on many issues about exploitation in the subcontinent, and particularly with the exploitation by the multinationals. So her book is quite relevant to the subject, and therefore I ask Kalpana to...
Okay, well, thank you very much, Naeem, and I'd just like to thank everyone who's organized this meeting, which I think is really, really important at this point, coming as it does after this really tragic event in Bangladesh. And I'm not calling it an accident, because I don't think we should think of what happened in Bangladesh as an accident. I think we need to think of it as an act of global corporate terror, because not only did this happen on a kind of unprecedented scale in terms of the women and men who lost their lives, but it's also been part of an ongoing series of such events. We've already heard about the killings in Karachi in September last year, when 289 people died, and then in November last year, you might remember that there was the Walmart fire, the fire in a factory which supplied Walmart, where 112 workers died in Bangladesh. And even since the 24th of April, there have been other incidents where people have died. Like, for example, 8 people were killed on the 9th of May, just 2 weeks after the Rana Plaza death, in a garment factory fire in Dhaka. So it's an ongoing situation, and this is really down to the systematic refusal of these corporates to address the workers' demands. Because I think one of the things we have to realize is that, you know, workers, despite the terrible conditions under which they're working, despite the lack of rights, have been organizing, have been fighting back, have been resisting. So after what happened in Rana Plaza, there were continuous protests going on. And if you saw any of the coverage of that, you will know that it was women who make up, I think, 85% of the workforce in the government sector. They were at the forefront of those protests, and they were making demands. So I think one of the reasons this meeting is so important is that it's about showing solidarity with those workers and finding ways to support their demands and push them forward. As I said, I think we should look at this in terms of corporate terror, and the reason is that the companies who make their money from these governments, you know, companies like Gap and Walmart and Asda, which is what Walmart is called over here, and Benetton, all the rest of them, Primark, of course, they are basically directly responsible for creating this situation. So it's not just about the fact that, of course, there's a chain, right? So they're not the ones who are running the factories, right? But that doesn't mean that they're not responsible. It's not just that they're somehow neglecting what's going on, you know, that they're not looking carefully enough and they're somehow just allowing it to happen. It's not even that they are taking advantage of a situation where labor is cheap because people are poor and so on. It's more than that. They are directly making these accidents happen because of the prices which they are paying to the suppliers. So they're pushing it down and down and down so that they will only buy from those suppliers at very, very low prices. And then, of course, this is not to, you know, exonerate those local producers, those local suppliers in the factories in Bangladesh, because they are also ruthless capitalists. So what they do is pass this right on immediately to the workers, right, in terms of pushing their wages down, in terms of not doing anything about health and safety, as we've heard earlier from the earlier speakers. So things like, you know, locking people in, barring the windows, things like keeping factories running 24 hours a day. You can imagine what that does to the structures of these buildings that are already so weak. Now, the other point I wanted to make about this is about the rise of cheap clothes, right? Why is it happening? Because, you know, I have a bit of a problem with a lot of the media coverage we've seen, which is really saying that this is all about demand in this country. You know, it's all about, it almost demonizes, you know, young working class women who go to Primark, that actually it's their fault. Because if only they didn't demand, you know, so many cheap clothes, then if only they thought about ethics a bit more, this wouldn't be happening. Now, that is not why this is happening, right? The reason is that, first of all, if you look at the workers' wages, that is such a tiny fraction of the final cost of those clothes, right? So it's still possible to give, like, 200% increase in workers' wages without it actually affecting the price of clothes anyway. But what is contained in that price is a huge, huge profit for the final sellers, the big corporations, the Walmarts and the Gaps and the Benettons, right? So basically, what this means is it's part of a global trend that's been going on all over the world since the 1970s, where the proportion of wages for workers in overall profit has been going down and down and down. Now the other thing is that why are these companies so keen to produce cheap clothes to sell in Britain and other countries? Well, one of the reasons is that it's then possible to make wages lower in this country. It's then possible to slash benefits like they are doing, and still people will be able to buy clothes from these shops. Because you may say, well, okay, people's income's been going down, but food prices have been going up, for example, but clothes haven't. But the thing is that when people have less income, they can't really stop buying food. But very often, if clothes aren't affordable, then they will just buy less clothes. So clothes have to be cheap in a situation where people's incomes are continually being pressed down in the recession under so-called austerity and so on. So it's all linked up. So I think this is another way that we need to look at the kind of connections between the struggles that are going on here for trade unionists and the struggles in Bangladesh and elsewhere in South Asia. Now, in terms of what this actually means for our solidarity strategy, I think one of the things is that we, as people have been saying, we need to put pressure on the companies directly, because they're right here on our high streets, and we're going into them. There've been protests already which have already had an impact, and they should be ongoing. But it has to go further than simply saying, that we demand better conditions, we demand minimum wages and that kind of thing. Because we need to link up directly with the workers' organizations, things like the National Federation of Garment Workers in Bangladesh and other groups which have been organizing the workers. Because they are the ones who can tell us what the effect of our campaigns is going to be directly. Because there have been situations, for example, in the past, when the US demanded that a minimum wage was implemented. But what happened was that because the US and British companies were still demanding from their buyers that the prices were really rock bottom, what these small factories did was they paid the new wage, but then they made people work much, much longer hours and much, much harder. So we'll only know about what's really going on the ground if we have the connections with the workers' organizations and we know what's going on. And in the longer term, what it needs to be about is really changing this whole structure so that these what are called value chains, right from the multinational corporations down to the smallest of factories and sometimes even people working in their homes, so that they get dismantled, so that this process doesn't go on anymore. And I think the other thing which is really important for us, particularly the South Asian communities in Britain, is putting pressure on the governments in South Asia, the Bangladeshi government, the Indian government, the Pakistani government, Sri Lankan government. Because, first of all, as we've heard from other speakers, they are hand in glove with the factory owners who are abusing workers and flouting all the regulations. I think, if I'm not wrong, that the owner of the Rana Plaza factory was very close to the Awami League. But it's really a matter that all of the mainstream parties in these countries are, working around the same sorts of economic policies. They may have other differences, but when it comes to the economic model, they're all basically saying the same thing. And I mean, I'll come back very briefly to what that is, but what I wanted to emphasize is that there are other movements. There are left movements, revolutionary movements going on, and those are the people that we work with and that we need to, I think, extend solidarity with further. Because what they're questioning is this whole neoliberal model that Bangladesh, for example, has been pursuing since the mid-80s, and it's the thing which is being promoted by the World Bank, the IMF, by DFID, and by all of these organizations, that which has been embraced by the governments in South Asia. So in Bangladesh, it's been all about promoting the ready-made garments industry, and now Bangladesh has 80% of its export revenue comes from that. So that means that they are dependent on those companies, right? But there are other strategies, there are other ways of organizing the economy, of other forms of development, because what we're really saying right across South Asia at the moment is a kind of corporate plundering of the whole region. And that, of course, includes the Indian multinational corporations, who are now very big players in that. So you have, for example, a lot of this production going on in economic export processing zones, in India, SEZs, special economic zones, which are places where the government doesn't extend. They are really controlled by the corporate, so they can make their own laws, they don't have to pay any taxes, and so on. And then, of course, the other thing they're doing across South Asia is grabbing land from people, so that people don't have any other options really in terms of a livelihood. People are losing their land on a huge scale to these multinational corporations. And one of the things we in South Asia Solidarity are involved with is supporting the campaign against a British company called Vedanta. Right? It's a British registered company, a mining company. It's on the London Stock Exchange. It's got very close links with the British government. Like last time David Cameron was in India, he was, lobbying for them. And they're notorious for what they're doing at the moment, which is trying to take over a sacred mountain, which is the home of a whole community called the Dongria Khons in Orissa. And those people who are Adivasi people, they have been organizing, fighting back for a very long time and resisting this corporate from taking over their land and their homeland. And it's very similar to the kinds of things which are happening in Bangladesh in terms of coal mining in Phulbari and other places. So this is going on across the region. But the same companies are also involved in attacks on workers. So you can't separate displacement and dispossession of people with attacks on workers' rights. For example, this same company Vedanta that I was talking about, a mining company, it's owned by, I think, the 17th richest man in Britain, Anil Agarwal. They are responsible for one of many recent industrial accidents in India in 2009, when a chimney of a power station which was being built collapsed to the ground. And they only have registered 40 people as being killed. But what is really terrible about it is that a lot of the people who were inside were on the ground floor of the building, and when this chimney collapsed, it went under the ground. And so a lot of people were trapped under the soil, and the company refused the rescue operations to go beyond the surface. They just did the overground rescue operations, and then they said now it has to stop. And it's rumored that they even brought in bulldozers to bulldoze over that whole area. So there's 100 people who are unaccounted for. Now when they went, those whose bodies were retrieved, most of them were migrant workers from another part of India, from Bihar particularly. And when the people we worked with, when they visited those families, they said that the bodies of their loved ones had been not brought back by the company, but just by the fellow workers. And what they brought from the company was 50,000 rupees and a receipt to be signed. So there was no apology, there was nothing, nobody from the company came, they just gave a receipt that you've received this money. So that's the kind of contempt with which people are actually treated. And this is really about the way, some people's lives are devalued within a sort of the context of global capitalism, really. And in the case of the Bangladesh thing, I think we also have to look at the fact that most of the people who died were women. And, a lot of the time, what these companies do is they build on and reinforce gender inequalities, right? They build on and reinforce patriarchy, basically, because we hear a lot about how, despite everything, these Western companies are bringing some sort of emancipation for women. But actually, what I would argue is a lot of the time they're not doing that. They're actually taking advantage of inequality. They're actually taking advantage of patriarchy. So what that does is make it possible for women to be exploited even more, because because, for example, it's not considered acceptable for women to work in any other industry than the garment industry, because women are seen as not really the main breadwinners, though so often they are, so they can be paid less, and so many other things which actually act to increase the profits which can be made from their labor. And of course, women, as we've seen, despite the image which is created in Britain of these women as kind of passive victims, in fact, it's the opposite. Despite the conditions they're facing, they've been at the forefront of all of these struggles. And I think it's really important that we support their demands. I just wanted to say very briefly before I finish that Naeem mentioned some of the protests which have already been going on, and I know that there was one here in Birmingham on May Day. You're probably aware that there has been quite an important agreement being negotiated, which is the Bangladesh Building and Fire Safety Agreement. And the reason this is different from earlier ones is that it's actually got legal sanction. It can actually be enforced through the courts. And a lot of the clothing companies have signed up to it under pressure, but two notable ones which haven't include Gap and also Asda, which, as we said, is a subsidiary of Walmart, and they are still demanding that there should be a voluntary code of conduct, which they, obviously is not going to have any effect at all. So those are perhaps some of the things we should think about in terms of targeting particular companies. Okay, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Kalpana, Kathy, thank you very much for your very insightful analysis of the situation with regards to the garment industry. Quite often we look at the surface and we only see what's on the surface. We don't really quite recognize and realize what's really going underneath, because of what's actually churning the whole thing. We've got a number of councillors and MPs that I mentioned earlier on who also are giving up their Saturday afternoon to come and join us and say a few words. Firstly, if I could introduce to you Councillor Wasim Zafar. He's the local councillor for Lozells and East Hanworth.
This very important meeting is being on a very, very important issue is being held here in my ward, and I want to thank the alliance of organisations and individuals who have brought this meeting together here. I want to first of all echo the sentiments of the speakers beforehand. I think what's going on in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, across the South Asian subcontinent is unacceptable. We are here in 2013, and the companies across there are supplying many of the companies across the Western world. And I also fear that what we've seen in Bangladesh is the tip of the iceberg. There are hundreds of thousands of other individuals who are working in unacceptable conditions there. What this also reminds me of is a campaign that I was involved in prior to becoming a councillor, when I was a Unite activist. I still am a Unite activist, but back in those days I had more time to spend on my trade union activities. It reminds me of a campaign that I worked with the likes of Jack Dromey when he was the Deputy General Secretary of Unite. He's now the Member of Parliament for Murderton. And it wasn't a campaign relating to a company in the Indian subcontinent. It was actually a company in Smethwick here in the West Midlands that I'm referring to. The company's name is Two Sister Foods. Some of you may have remembered that. I think towards the latter years, to the latter part of 2009, they sacked 60 Unite members. Some of them were shop stewards who complained against racism from management at the company, and also complained about the working environment within that company. And many of the staff at Two Sisters Food, it's a massive company now. They've got 18 different plants across the country. They've got plants in America and across Europe now as well, and I think he's also setting up plants in India. He is an incredible businessman who's earned a lot of money on the back of employing predominantly migrants, low-skilled migrants. And I think the biggest shock came to him when the Labour government introduced minimum wage, because some of the payments that he was giving these individuals were diabolical. He sacked these 60 workers, and Unite went in there with our leadership team to try and negotiate to get these 60 Unite members back in there. And we were particularly concerned because he'd sacked all our shop stewards too at that particular time. The negotiations weren't getting anywhere. He was an individual who'd employed union busters at all his plants, so he wanted to get rid of the union. However, we came to know that he was supplying meat and chicken to most of the high street companies, whether it's Asda, Tesco, Morrison's, Marks and Spencer's, you name it, he was supplying those particular companies. So we had a change of strategy as Unite. We thought we're going to spend every Saturday afternoon until these 60 workers get back in, going to the main high streets and protesting outside these particular companies who were the customers of Two Sister Foods, who sacked these 69 workers. Obviously the reputational issues of these companies is far more important than anything else. And the other thing is, when we were out there campaigning outside and protesting outside these shops, many of the customers were joining in and making a U-turn away from these supermarkets. So they were losing customers based on the information that we were sharing with them about the supplier to these big companies. And it was the pressure from the likes of Asda, Tesco, Morrison's to Two Sister Foods that helped us get these 60 workers reinstated, and it helped us really renegotiate the terms of the staff there. So that was a campaign close to us. We've still got some issues with Two Sisters. Ironically, 70 of our members again yesterday have been given redundancy notices. So there's ongoing problems with this particular firm, but we continue to have a better relationship with our contacts in the supermarkets that are supplying them. So the clear message from me, and a pledge as well, the message from me is I think we need to have a better or a more proactive relationship with the customers of these companies in the Indian subcontinent who are importing in the products, and also to highlight this particular issue to the customers who are buying from these supermarkets. And the pledge from me is, as an elected member and as a trade union activist, I'm more than happy to assist with these particular campaigns. So if there's any action from me, I know my colleague Councillor Zia Islam is here, and I'm sure other councillors also join us. I have a substantial diaspora community from these particular countries who have been lobbying me, attending my surgeries, writing to me, tweeting and Facebooking me about this particular issue. So it's something that it's a duty upon me to work on this particular issue, and I'm more than happy to support the Alliance in whatever way possible. And thank you again for organising this meeting.
Once again, thank you very much for coming along at short notice. And like you also mentioned, we have Councillor Zia Islam as well here from Ashton. I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you like to say a few words very quickly?
I'll come to this.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry for the late because my car was out of order. Nobody will believe me. My nephew, Mr. Chaudhry, might not believe me, but it was out of order. That is all right. I take a seat. I'm comfortable. Many thanks to my colleague Councillor Zafar, Wasim Zafar anyway, because we actually share so many things between me and him for any problems within the community. So I really congratulate him being a councillor, because he is doing a very good job within the Ashton and Northern and whatever. About this ongoing problem in Pakistan, Bangladesh and India, can I tell you my personal experience? Every December I normally go to Bangladesh with his 4 weeks holidays. And there was a coincidence. I met some of the factory workers, the women worker, actually 2 years ago, and I actually sat it with the family and I discussed how their working conditions. There was no actually terms and conditions of the employment contract or anything. You see, they were working from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And they are continuously working. It is very, very low wages, you see, because they had to work even under all these conditions because of to survive their, to assist their family members, you see, parents or children or brother, sister, and all these things. So that has been happening in Bangladesh. But one thing I just would like to highlight one thing. Probably I've been watching for the last few months. Subdan India, probably many of you are actually watching all this program, which is based on the real facts, you see, although it is there are some actions going on, but actually it is a true fact in Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh and Punjab, how they are exploiting the women and the children and killing the children, women. Actually, as a British politician, not me, because the MEP, European Union and our House of Commons, they should do something about it, not only in Bangladesh, but affecting all over in Asia, and this is the only thing I'd like to say. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for sharing with us a few words of encouragement. If I could ask now Dr. Phil Bennion, the Member of European Parliament for the West Midlands. He keeps himself very busy and in supporting these issues, in particular affecting Southeast Asia. Now, he's got a portfolio around that, which he'll no doubt tell you a bit about later on, and the wonderful work that he's doing at a European context to push for greater and better change in Southeast Asia around a number of things, including the garment industry. So if I could hand over to Dr. Phil Bennion to say a few words.
Yes, thank you, Noble. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I'm just more than happy that you've actually invited me to speak. I think it's difficult sometimes to understand why there should be a European context to the factory fires and the building collapse and working conditions. There's also, of course, the shipbuilding industry or the ship freighting industry in South Asia. And why does this have a European context? Well, ever since the Lisbon Treaty went through, the European Union has a much stronger role in foreign relations. We have something called the External Action Service, and all MEPs are given a role in a foreign delegation. My own delegation is the South Asia delegation, which deals with the relations between the European Union and all of the nations of South Asia except India. So we have Pakistan, we have Bangladesh, we have Nepal and Bhutan, Sri Lanka and the Maldives in my delegation. And I have to say that it's been a very busy delegation because pretty well all of those countries have had issues. I got involved with this issue of factory safety just after the fire in Karachi, and before we had actually dealt with that at a European level in terms of putting forward a resolution, we had also the fire in Dhaka. And at that point I became the author of a resolution to the European Parliament on factory safety in both Pakistan and Bangladesh. We passed that motion, which called for much stronger regulation, which called even at that stage for trade union recognition. And within a few weeks of passing that resolution, we had this terrible event where over 1,000 people lost their lives. At that point, the Parliament as a whole decided they had to bring the whole issue forward again. And my own role again was as author of the resolution. The Parliament decided to put a resolution forward, and I was one of the 2 or 3 people who drafted that. We do this across the political groups. I represent the Liberal group on the South Asia delegation, but I worked hand in hand with the other main political groups in putting together a resolution. I didn't just leave it as a resolution, because even though they are taken seriously, and we know they're taken seriously because I meet the ambassadors of Bangladesh, Pakistan and Sri Lanka on a regular basis in Brussels and Strasbourg, and I know how seriously they take it when we're critical of their own governments. But I also decided we had to look at this issue from probably 3 different angles. Firstly, the worker representation. What we can't accept is life being cheap in any part of the world. We're used to good health and safety, and I think we have to take it on board that workers across the world, even in the poorest countries, should have at least some basic standards of health and safety, and trade union representation and recognition in the workplace is absolutely vital if you are going to have a robust health and safety regime. So again, we not only put it in the resolution, but I tackled the ambassador about the issue of worker representation, and I also then had a meeting with Dipu Modi, the foreign minister from Bangladesh, and putting very strongly that union recognition had to be brought in very, very quickly. And I have to say that the government has so far responded. It may not be totally free in terms of worker representation, but they have actually made moves. The second area we had to tackle, and again it was largely through the governments of Bangladesh and Pakistan, but it was on tightening up the safety regime. And we have this accord that Bangladesh have brought forward. We've also been working with Pakistan in the same way, and the accord brings forward the trade unions again, but also we asked them to do something about the corruption in their health and safety, their factory inspection services. We've had so many tales of factories getting their safety certificates simply through a bung from the factory owners to either the political masters or the individual or the individual inspectors. So that's another thing we had to make sure that the system on the ground was not corrupt, and it's not just the government side of that, but also the supply chain side, because a lot of the Western companies who buy the goods actually have in place some form of assurance, but even that assurance system the companies were getting round it. They were paying off the inspectors, and we were finding even the Rana Plaza was supposedly an assurance operation. So we had to make sure that the systems on the ground were robust. The European Union, of course, has a large aid budget to the South Asian countries. It's the biggest donor, and one of the things we also put forward was that the aid budget should be focused. One of the things it should focus on was building capacity in the administrative side, in the factory inspectorate side, and helping the Bangladesh and Pakistan governments build their capacity to actually run a robust health and safety system. Now, the third area we decided we needed action was with the companies themselves, with the Western buyers. So I personally wrote to Asda Walmart, to Gap, to Primark, to Benetton, and I think there might have been one other. I thought there was 5. We had pardon?
The Marsh Orange, Mango.
It might have been. I can't remember. There was definitely 5. But we had responses from Primark and Benetton. Primark agreed to meet me in London, but before we got the meeting arranged, they actually signed up to the accord, which they signed up, I think, the day before we had the protest in Birmingham, when I joined a number of people who I see here at that protest. And in a way, the protest became slightly changed in that we were calling for other companies to follow Primark's example and signing up to the accord. As far as Benetton is concerned, they did actually invite me to go to meet their top management in Treviso in Italy, but it's very, very difficult because I'm in Brussels and Strasbourg all week, here at the weekend, so it's finding the time. But we still see that there's Gap and the Walmart as the group, and also the biggest group in Germany as well, the biggest budget clothes chain in Germany has also refused to sign up to the accord. So we have to keep pushing in that direction. Some people in the Parliament wanted a trade ban on Bangladesh. I absolutely resisted that. There is the consequences of a trade ban would simply be the removal of this trade, possibly to Vietnam or somewhere similar, or Cambodia, and the likelihood is that Bangladesh would struggle to get that trade back over a period of time. So I don't think a trade ban is the right way. We have to tackle it through these three areas, and we are seeing now that some corporate responsibility is being shown, but it's still only in its early stages. We've got a lot further to go. We need to make sure that the companies on the ground in Bangladesh are properly regulated, so that they have proper contracts with their suppliers, that the trade unions are allowed to organise properly, not just to negotiate wages, but to negotiate health and safety at a higher standard. And we also need to still work with politicians in both Pakistan who've got a new government, Bangladesh where there's an election later in this year. I was an observer at the Pakistan election recently. I may well be an observer at the Bangladesh election later on in the year, around about Christmas. And we have to work with all the politicians in those countries, government and opposition. This is exactly what I'm doing to improve the situation. Thank you.
Dr. Phil Benyon, Member of European Parliament. Phil, once again, thank you very much for sharing with us your thoughts, but more importantly, the strategic work that you're actually doing in the European context in terms of pushing the buttons to make some changes in those regions, in particular in Bangladesh, and obviously we've shared in the past a number of other work that you've actually been doing. So very much appreciated, and for the records, that it's been noted of the work that you're actually doing to make some changes in those areas. So thank you very much for that. Can I now introduce Iqbal Solomon? He is the Secretary of the UK Coalition of Civic Organisation, and I've asked him to sort of say a few words to conclude our session, and thereafter we'll have a few moments if there's any question or answers or any comments from the floor. So Iqbal.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Community Foundation and TUC for helping us organise this meeting today. It's important to remember we can pressure the retailers from the UK, but there's also a big political problem in some of these countries, particularly Bangladesh. Now, when the tragedy in Sabah happened, where over 1,000 lost their lives, we had up to over 100 factories being closed by the government. And that was just a show. A few days later, these factories failed to meet basic safety requirements. And only a few days after the tragedy, these factories were closed. Once the story calmed down, once everyone started to focus on other stories, they reopened these factories without any changes to the conditions. Now that's what goes on in Bangladesh. The owner of the factory forced these workers to work in a building where the cracks were appearing, where the safety inspectors warned the owner not to send the workers in. Now, no matter where in the world you work, no person has the right to be forced into a building that's about to collapse, and we know what happened later. And the reason why the factory owner felt he could do this is because he had links to the ruling party, Awami League. He thought he was above the law. He's done this many times before, and he was one of the main financial sponsors of the ruling party. So, and that's how he managed to get a permit to basically, he had a permit to build a 5-story building. He got it signed up as a 7-story building because he's a ruling party member. Now, we have to somehow find ways to pressure the governments as well. That's difficult. But here in this country, we can pressure retailers like we have done a few weeks ago outside Primark. So these are important things to remember. And when there is no respect for human rights in Bangladesh, for political opponents and for other pressure groups, you're not going to get human rights for workers. That's clear cut, and we have to remember. And Aminul Islam, I don't know how many of you know this name, Aminul Islam, who tried to campaign for the garment workers, who tried to start up a union, and he was abducted and killed just over a year ago in April. Now, even to this day, there's no investigation on his abduction and on his killing. Now, we need to ask the question why that is. So we should try to. Today we've had this public meeting. We've heard from several guests, but the work shouldn't stop here. We should look at ways to come together, how we can support these workers, how we can support groups who are forming unions, who are forming groups to support this work. It's important that you leave your contact details so we can keep you informed of any future events and move forward and discuss what further steps we can take. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you very much for your thoughts on that. We'll now open it to questions and comments. If you have any questions to the panel, or if you have any comments to make, please introduce your name, and if you are from an organisation, if you can say which organisation you're from, and please make your statements very short. We've had a lot of speeches from the front, and I would ask people just to make a short statement.
I'm Jai Chaudhary. I'm Vice Chair of the Coalition of the Civic Organization in Birmingham, UK. I have some comments and questions to the guests, if you don't mind. First of all, I asked to my Right Honourable MEP, Dr. Phil Billion, is very good to close to our community. You say if trade ban is no good for Bangladesh. I understand your point of view. You try to help the Bangladeshi people, but if you don't do the hard action to the government, you can't get what you want to do it, right?
Yeah.
I thanks to the President Barack Obama, what he did action last 2 weeks ago. He withdrew the GSP from the Bangladesh, and then he gave the condition to do it immediately. If you don't do it, we'll ban the trade. Now government is shaking, because government is there. I'm not any political particular group I'm supporting. What I'm supporting is the reality and the truth. Government is dictating the country, first of all. Second of all, is the most corrupted. And then government can change the law. What Rana Plaza owner is arrested by the Bangladesh Penal Code law, he will release 26 months from the prison. Is become a convicted. But government is not changing any law. Like I give one example, the War Crime Tribunal. They changed the law 48 hours time to death penalty. May I right or wrong? Probably you know about it. But about the Rana Plaza, they are not changing the law. How European Union do, if they say, okay, no go to trade ban. If European Union do the temporary trade ban, like a President Obama done it, then Bangladesh government will do whatever the requirement. Secondly, most important, and the Western company, what benefit they getting from the Bangladesh, no other country in this world cannot afford to provide the cheap oil to make the garments. Because I know about it, my cousin is the owner of the garments factory in Bangladesh. How the secrecy from the Western company, they get the credit facility from the garments owner for 1 year. They make the goods, they bring the England or Europe, they sell the goods and they pay the money. So this sort of facility Vietnam cannot afford, China cannot afford, India cannot afford, no world cannot afford, only Bangladesh can afford. That means is no risk for Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is a 40 years independent country. Bangladesh is not reliant to the garments, only 40 lakhs people works. Bangladesh has a lot of resources, gas, natural resources, petrol, manpower, foreign currency, export import, jute, and other natural resources. Bangladesh is not dependent to the governments. This is the political dialogue. I asked to the Philbinian, this is the reality about the Bangladesh. If you do the trade ban for temporarily, like America done it, then government.
America haven't done a trade ban. They've just it's GSP plus.
Yes.
It's everything but arms. It's basically tariff-free access to markets.
Yeah.
Now, even in our resolution to the European Parliament's resolution, it called for a review of GSP plus if we don't get if we don't get some very, very quick improvement.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've let the Bangladesh government know that GSP plus is at risk, and at very, very in very, very short order it's at risk if they don't improve things. And I think that is the right way to do it. A temporary trade ban means that the companies have got to go elsewhere straight away. Once they create those other supply chains, you will struggle to get the business back. The best thing to do is to threaten to withdraw GSP plus. Give that threat some real, so that the government's got to believe that it's going to happen, and get some leverage. And you've got to use the leverage. If you make a trade ban, you've lost your leverage. What you've got to do is threaten them. They'll lose GSP plus, and get them to believe it and get them to change.
So you are the politician, you know what to do. But one information I do want to say. Sheikh Hasina came yesterday and sit down with the people.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone else wants to comment on those two comments?
I just wanted to add something
Yes.
briefly. I mean, one thing I think we have to realize is when, just as we know very clearly that the Bangladesh government is acting in the interest of the business owners, right? The people like the guy who owns the Rana Plaza factory. Similarly, if we're calling on the British government or the US government to take action, we have to remember that they are going to act in whatever is in the interest of British corporates and American corporates. So whatever America has done, that has been the underlying reason for it. And I think, we can't be calling on those governments to come and discipline the Bangladesh government and therefore help workers in Bangladesh. That's not going to happen. And I think we also need to keep in mind that the workers' organizations in Bangladesh have said that they don't want a boycott because they don't want people to be laid off in huge numbers, which can just happen overnight if this kind of thing goes on. So I think we have to keep their demands in mind as well.
Thank you for that. There's a hand at the back, a gentleman there at the back, and then I'll come back to the front in the lane.
Hi, I'm Graham Stevenson. I'm the secretary of the Birmingham Unite Union's community branch, which is a new conception within the trade union movement, focused on people who work but people who live, and it's open to people to join. But I although offering Unite Community support for some of the suggestions that we have some kind of local activity that the focuses on need, I'm kind of drawn to comment due to a previous life that I held before I retired quite recently. For a quarter of a century I was a senior official of the Transport and General Workers Union. In fact, I headed the TNG's transport department, and that meant that in response to the sort of memory flagging that Kathy gave me by talking about the international trade union organisations, I spent a lot of time working in the International Transport Workers Federation. That also, for my sins, meant that I was involved in its European arm, the European Transport Workers Federation, and Phil rather reminded me of the many, many moons I spent dealing with arcane European regulations. Now, I mention this not simply to bask in ancient glory, but to point out that as far as the trade unions are concerned, and I'm going to give a couple of examples, working towards a particular aim and working in a particular way are going to be very important. And if you press the right buttons, you'll get